Snow had been falling since dawn, wrapping the forest in a white silence that felt almost sacred. The wind howled through the pine trees like a wounded animal, rattling the wooden shutters of Emma's cabin. Inside, the faint glow of a dying fire painted her face in amber light. She had learned to live with silence. It was her only companion through 3 long winter sets. She'd chosen solitude over a life filled with loss. Emma moved slowly, wrapping a threadbare shawl tighter around her shoulders. Her pantry was nearly empty, a few cans, some dried herbs, and half a loaf of bread. But she was used to little. The forest had taken much from her, yet it had also taught her endurance. Outside, the wind shifted suddenly, carrying with it a sound that didn't belong to nature, the faint, distant cry of someone in distress. Her heart stopped for a moment. Then came the sound of frantic barking, a horse's panicked whinny, and the unmistakable growl of wolves. Emma froze. The storm made it impossible to see more than a few feet beyond her window, but instinct pulled her to the door. She grabbed her lantern and her old rifle, heart pounding. When she stepped outside, the cold hit her like a blade. Snow swirled around her face, stinging her skin. Through the white blur, she saw a man struggling to pull a child from a fallen horse. 2 wolves circled them, their eyes glinting in the darkness. Without thinking, Emma fired into the air. The sharp crack shattered the night. The wolves vanished into the woods. "Over here," she shouted, her voice barely carried through the wind. The man lifted his head, tall, broad-shouldered, eyes wide with exhaustion. He was holding a girl no older than 10, wrapped in a torn blanket. By the time they reached the cabin, the child's lips were blue. Emma rushed to light more firewood, draping every blanket she owned around the girl. The man knelt beside her, trembling from cold and fear. "Thank you," he managed, voice rough. We lost our way." The storm came out of nowhere. Emma poured him a cup of tea, weak but warm. "You're lucky I heard you," she said softly. "No one passes through this forest in winter." He nodded, his gaze heavy with something unspoken. "My name's James. This is my daughter, Sarah." Emma smiled faintly. "I'm Emma." Outside, the storm roared louder, pressing against the cabin like a living thing. But inside, for the first time in a long while, Emma wasn't alone. As she watched the firelight flicker across James's face, something stirred within her, a fragile warmth she hadn't felt in years. She didn't know it yet, but the storm had brought her more than just strangers. It had brought her the beginning of everything she thought she'd lost. The storm had not eased by morning. The world outside the cabin was a blur of white and silence, broken only by the crackle of fire and the sound of the wind pressing against the walls. Inside, warmth slowly returned to the air. Emma sat beside Sarah, checking her breathing, while James tended to the fire, his hands trembling slightly as he added another log. "You saved our lives," he said quietly, not looking at her. His voice was rough, like someone unused to saying thank you. Emma shook her head. "You would have done the same." James gave a faint, tired smile. "Maybe, but I don't think we have made it another hour out there." For a while, neither spoke. The storm made conversation seem small, like words would be swallowed by the wind. Emma poured him another cup of weak tea. His hands, still shaking, wrapped around the tin cup as if it held something more than heat, maybe safety. Sarah stirred and blinked, her lips no longer blue. "Papa," she whispered. James knelt beside her, relief washing over his face. "I'm here, sweetheart. You're safe." Emma turned away for a moment, letting them have their space. Watching them brought a strange ache to her chest, a feeling she hadn't allowed herself in years. Family. It was something she'd buried deep, along with every memory of her own loss. James looked up. "You live out here alone?" Emma nodded, her gaze fixed on the window. "For 3 winters now. That's a long time to be alone." "It's quieter that way," she said softly. "Easier, too. No one gets hurt." He studied her for a moment, as if trying to read the story behind her calm voice. But he didn't push. Instead, He simply nodded and looked back at the fire. Hours passed slowly. The storm began to fade, leaving only the soft whisper of snow falling from the roof. James stepped outside briefly to check on the horse, then returned covered in frost. One of them didn't make it, he said quietly, but the other's still standing. Emma lowered her eyes. I'm sorry. He shrugged. Could have been worse. For the first time, Emma noticed the faint limp in his walk, the small wince when he moved. You're hurt, she said. It's nothing. She frowned and motioned for him to sit. Let me see. When he finally relented, she knelt beside him, rolling up the torn fabric around his knee. A deep gash ran across his leg, red and swollen. She reached for her small wooden box of herbs and cloth. You patch up strangers often? He asked with a dry laugh. Emma smiled faintly. Only the lucky ones who find my door. Outside, the wind began to quiet completely, leaving the cabin wrapped in stillness. The fire burned low, and for the first time since the night began, it felt like the world had stopped spinning. As the night deepened, the forest outside grew calm, the wind fell silent, leaving behind only the soft crackle of the dying fire. The cabin felt smaller now, the air heavy with the smell of smoke and herbs. Gene sat by the hearth, his leg bandaged neatly, watching Emma as she moved quietly around the room. You're good with that, he said, nodding toward his bandage. Emma looked up. You learn a few things when the nearest town's 2 days away. He smiled faintly. Still, you've got a healer's hands. She didn't answer, only poured him another cup of tea. Her movements were careful, measured, the way people move when they've spent too long in silence. Cyril was asleep now, wrapped in a blanket by the fire. Her soft breathing filled the small space. James watched her with that mix of love and guilt that only a parent carries. Her mother would have known what to do, he murmured. Emma paused mid-motion. She's gone. He nodded slowly. Last spring, fever took her before we could reach a doctor. His voice cracked slightly, the kind of break that comes from trying too hard not to. For a long time, Emma said nothing. The only sound was the pop of the fire and the whisper of falling snow outside. I'm sorry, she said finally. Loss doesn't care how strong we are, does it? James looked at her, really looked. There was something in her tone, something that told him she knew the shape of grief all too well. You've lost someone too. Emma's eyes flickered to the fire. My husband, 4 winters ago. He went hunting and didn't come back. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was full of understanding. 2 lives scarred by the same kind of pain, now sitting together under one fragile roof. People said I should have left, she continued softly. But the forest, it felt like the only place that still remembered him. So I stayed. James leaned back, his eyes on the flames. I guess the storm had its reasons for bringing me here. Emma glanced at him, a hint of warmth touching her tired face. Or maybe you were just too stubborn to freeze. He laughed quietly, a rough, genuine sound that made her smile in spite of herself. Outside, the sky began to clear. Through the small window, the moonlight spilled over the snow, silver and still. Emma threw another log into the fire, then wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. You should rest, she said softly. James nodded, eyes already heavy. Wake me if the wolves come back. I will, she whispered. But as she sat by the fire, watching the 2 of them sleep, father and daughter, strangers yet somehow familiar, Emma felt something stir in her chest again. Something warm and frightening. Hope. When Emma opened her eyes, the world was glowing. Sunlight spilled through the frost-covered window, scattering over the wooden floor like shards of gold. The storm had passed, leaving behind a silence so deep it felt sacred. She rose quietly, careful not to wake James or Sarah. They were still asleep by the fire, their faces calm for the first time since the night before. The warmth that had once felt far now seemed to belong here, like the cabin itself had been waiting for it. Emma stepped outside. The air was sharp and pure, the kind that burns your lungs but clears your soul. The forest was unrecognizable. Every branch, every roof beam of her small home was heavy with snow that glittered under the pale morning sun. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney. For the first time in months, she smiled. She heard footsteps behind her. James stepped out, pulling his coat tighter. His hair was still messy, his face marked by exhaustion. But his eyes were alive. "Looks like we made it," he said softly. Emma nodded, her breath forming clouds in the air. The forest always looks new after a storm, like it's forgiving you for surviving. He chuckled. "Never thought I'd owe my life to a stranger in the woods." "Stranger or not," she replied, "we're both still breathing. That's what matters." They stood for a moment in comfortable silence, watching the horizon where the sun began to climb over the white hills. Somewhere in the distance, a bird cried, the first sign that the world was waking again. James glanced at the barn behind the cabin. "I should check on the horse, the one that made it." "I'll help," she said quickly, surprising herself. Inside the small barn, the smell of hay and damp wood filled the air. The horse snorted softly when James approached, brushing snow off its mane. Emma handed him a bucket of water she'd broken the ice from. Their hands brushed just briefly, but the contact lingered like a spark. "Thank you," he murmured. She looked away. "You can't travel far yet. The roads are buried." James nodded. "We'll stay until it clears. I'll work for my keep, chop wood, fix what needs fixing." "You don't owe me anything," she said. He smiled faintly. "Then let me do it anyway." Back inside, Sarah was awake, sitting near the fire with a sleepy smile. "It's so warm here," she said. "Like Mama used to make it." Emma froze for a heartbeat, then crouched beside her. "Your Mama must have been a good woman." "She was," Sarah said softly. "Papa says she still watches us when it snows." Emma glanced at James, who stood quietly in the doorway. Their eyes met, and for a fleeting second, it felt as if they both understood something neither dared to say out loud. The storm had ended, but something new had begun, something fragile, like sunlight breaking through melting ice. The rest of the day unfolded slowly, like the forest itself was learning how to breathe again. Sunlight melted the icicles from the cabin roof, and the constant drip of water was the only sound for hours. James worked outside, splitting logs near the barn. His movements were steady but careful. His injured leg forced him to pace himself. Every swing of the axe sent small echoes across the quiet valley. Inside, Emma mixed herbs in a pot over the fire, humming softly to herself, a melody she hadn't remembered in years. Sarah followed her everywhere, curious and bright-eyed. "Can I help, Miss Emma?" Emma smiled. "You can stir the soup, but be gentle, it's as stubborn as your father." Sarah giggled. "Papa says the same about me." From outside came James's low laugh. "I heard that." Emma rolled her eyes, hiding a smile. For the first time, the cabin was filled not just with warmth, but with life. Laughter, a sound that had been absent for so long, now mixed with the crackle of the fire and the soft clatter of dishes. Later, when the sun dipped low and the snow began to glow pink, James came inside carrying a pile of chopped wood. "That should last us a while," he said, dropping it beside the door. Emma wiped her hands on her apron. "You're still limping." He shrugged. "You patch me up good, but I'm not made of iron." "Could have fooled me," she replied, smirking. He chuckled, then took a seat by the fire. Sarah had fallen asleep again, curled up with Emma's old quilt. For a moment, James just watched her, then glanced at Emma. She hasn't slept this peacefully since before. Emma sat across from him, the firelight dancing between them. "Children feel safety before they understand it," she said quietly. "She knows she's safe now." James nodded, eyes thoughtful. "I think I forgot what that feels like. Safety." He shook his head. "Peace." Emma looked at him for a long moment. "Maybe peace isn't something you find," she said. "Maybe it's something that finds you when you stop running." James leaned back, smiling faintly. "And here I thought I was just lucky to find a roof." She laughed softly. Luck had nothing to do with it. The forest brought you here. The fire burned low as twilight settled around the cabin. Outside, the world was hushed and still, bathed in the gentle blue of evening. Emma stood to check the kettle. "Tomorrow," she said, "we'll fix the fence by the barn. You can't leave yet, and I could use an extra pair of hands." Jeans grinned. "Are you offering work or company?" She gave him a sideways glance. "Whichever makes you work harder." He laughed, the kind of laugh that carried warmth even through the cold night air. For the first time in years, Emma didn't dread the next sunrise. Somewhere between the firelight and laughter, something had quietly shifted. Not love, not yet, but something just as rare. Hope, reborn from the ashes of a long, lonely winter. The snow had hardened overnight, forming a crust that cracked beneath their boots. The sky was clear pale blue, and the air smelled of pine and wood smoke. Emma pulled her coat tighter as she walked toward the fence line. Jeans followed, carrying an axe and a small bundle of wooden planks he'd salvaged from behind the barn. The fence had taken a beating from the storm, half buried in snow, its posts tilted like weary soldiers. Jeans knelt beside one, testing its strength with a gloved hand. "Storm took the worst of it," he said, "but it's fixable." "Everything's fixable," Emma replied, "if you care enough to try." He gave her a small smile, the kind that never quite reached his eyes. "You talk like someone who's done a lot of fixing." "I've had practice." They worked in silence for a while, the rhythm of hammering and the crunch of boots filling the air. Emma passed him nails, her breath forming faint clouds in the cold. The sun was high enough now to warm their faces, melting small droplets from the branches above. Every so often, Jeans winced, favoring his injured leg. Emma noticed but said nothing. She just slowed her pace slightly, matching his rhythm. After a while, he leaned on the fence post, catching his breath. "When I was a kid," he said, "my father used to make me fix things. Every time I broke a tool or tore a saddle strap, he'd say, 'If you can't mend what you ruin, you don't deserve to own it.'" Emma tilted her head. "Sounds like a hard man." "He was," Jean said with a half-laugh, "but he wasn't wrong. Problem is, I've spent most of my life trying to fix things that can't be fixed." She looked at him, understanding dawning in her eyes. "Like the past." He nodded slowly. "Like myself." The wind picked up slightly, carrying the smell of smoke from the cabin chimney. Emma drove another nail into the post, her hands steady. "Maybe that's not your job anymore," she said. "Maybe you just need to build something new." Jeans watched her, the quiet confidence in her movements, the way the light caught the edge of her braid. "You sound like you've been thinking about that for a while." Emma gave a faint smile. 3 winters give you time to think." He chuckled softly. "I guess they do." By the time they finished, the sun was dipping low again. The repaired fence stood straight and strong, cutting a clean line through the snow. Jean stepped back, wiping his brow with a glove. "That's a fine bit of work." Emma nodded, a touch of pride in her voice. "You're not bad for a man with one good leg." He laughed, the sound rich and warm against the cold air. And as they walked back toward the cabin, the fading light painted long golden shadows behind them, 2 figures moving side by side, both carrying more than the tools in their hands. By the time the last light faded, the forest had turned into a sea of silver shadows. Inside the cabin, the fire burned bright, filling the room with that soft orange glow that makes everything seem closer, more real. Emma ladled stew into 3 wooden bowls. The smell of herbs and slow-cooked meat filled the air. Sarah sat cross-legged on the floor beside the fire, brushing the mane of a small wooden horse Jeans had carved for her earlier. The sound of her quiet humming blended with the pop and hiss of burning logs. James sat across from Emma at the small table, the flames flickering between them. "I haven't eaten this well in months," he said after the first bite. "You could run a cookhouse and make a fortune." She smiled faintly. "I'd rather keep my peace than chase a fortune." He nodded, swirling the spoon in his bowl. "Peace," he repeated softly. I used to think it came with money. Turns out, it comes with silence and a warm fire. Emma looked at him over the rim of her cup. And good company. Their eyes met for a heartbeat too long enough for both of them to notice. She looked away first, pretending to adjust the pot. Sarah's voice broke the moment. "Papa, tell the story about the horses again." James laughed. "You've heard that one 100 times. I don't care. I like the ending." He looked at Emma, who nodded toward the fire with a small smile. "Go on," she said. "We could all use a good story." So he told it about the wild horses that broke free during a storm, and how he and Sarah's mother had chased them for miles across the open plains. His voice carried warmth and loss in equal measure. Emma watched him, imagining the scene, the sound of hooves, the vast horizon, the laughter of a woman now gone. When he finished, the room was quiet again. Sarah had fallen asleep mid-story, her small head resting on her father's arm. James brushed a strand of hair from her face, a look of tenderness softening his features. "She looks like her mother," Emma said quietly. "Every day more so," he whispered. "Sometimes it's comforting. Sometimes it hurts." Emma nodded, understanding all too well. "That's how you know they never really leave us." James looked at her, really looked. The flickering firelight caught in his eyes. And for a moment, he seemed to forget the weight he carried. "You ever get tired of being alone, Emma?" She hesitated. "Being alone's easier than losing again." He nodded slowly, the truth of it hanging heavy between them. Then, after a pause, he smiled, small, tired, but real. "Maybe it's not about choosing one or the other. Maybe it's about finding someone who makes the risk worth it." Emma laughed softly, shaking her head. "You talk like a man who's been reading poetry." He grinned. "No books where I come from. Just hard lessons and long nights." She smiled back, and this time, it wasn't the polite smile she used to hide behind. It was real, bright, and alive. The morning broke gray and heavy, clouds hanging low over the trees. The storm hadn't returned, but something in the air felt colder, sharper. Even the birds were silent. Emma was tending the fire when she heard it, the distant echo of hooves. Slow at first, then clearer, steady, deliberate. She froze, her hand still on the kettle. James stepped out from the back room, his expression shifting as he caught the sound. "Expecting someone?" she asked quietly. He shook his head. "No one knows I'm here." But the way he said it, low and guarded, told her there was more behind those words. Moments later, 2 riders appeared through the tree line, dark figures against the snow. They wore heavy coats, their horses steaming in the cold. Emma's stomach tightened. Strangers meant trouble more often than not in these parts. James moved toward the door, his limp slowing him, but his stance still protective. "Stay inside," he murmured. "I can take care of myself," she replied, voice steady. The riders pulled up near the fence they'd fixed just the day before. One of them, a tall man with a trimmed beard, raised a gloved hand in greeting. James hollered. James's jaw tightened. "Depends who's asking." The man dismounted. "Name's Carver. I work for the Whitmore Ranch, your ranch." Last I heard, his tone carried a mix of respect and confusion. "We've been looking for you. Folks thought you were dead." Emma glanced sharply at James. "Your ranch?" James exhaled slowly, as if the weight of a secret had finally caught him. "I told you I own land," he said quietly. "I didn't tell you how much." Carver continued. "Your foreman's been running things since you disappeared. There's talk in town they want to sell. Said you lost your nerve after your wife passed." The silence that followed was heavy. Emma looked at James, and for the first time, saw not the quiet man who mended her fence, but the weary air of something far larger. "I didn't lose my nerve," James said finally, his voice firm. "I just forgot what it was all for." Carver studied him, then glanced toward Emma. "You plan on coming back, boss?" "Folks are starting to lose faith." James hesitated, then nodded. "I'll come, soon." Carver tipped his hat. "We'll be waiting." He mounted up again, and within minutes, The two riders vanished into the trees, their silhouettes swallowed by white. Emma stood in the doorway, arms crossed. So, that's the truth. Jeans met her eyes. I never lie. I just didn't think it mattered here. She looked away, her voice quiet but sharp. Everything matters when people trust you, Jeans. Outside, the snow began to fall again, thin, hesitant flakes drifting through the air like the first whispers of a storm yet to come. The fire burned low, its last embers casting long, trembling shadows across the walls. Outside, the world was quiet again, too quiet. Emma sat by the table, her hands wrapped around a mug gone cold, while James stood near the window, staring into the snow as if it held answers. Neither had spoken since the riders left. Finally, she broke the silence. You're not just some ranch hand passing through the woods. James turned, his expression weary. No, I'm not. So all this time, the man I took in, the one who said he had nothing, turns out to own half the valley. Her voice wasn't angry, not really. It was something worse, disappointed. I didn't come here to hide who I was, he said quietly. I came because I didn't want to be who I was anymore. Emma's eyes softened, but her tone stayed firm. You could have told me. He moved closer, the floor creaking under his boots. Would it have changed how you saw me? She hesitated. The question hung heavy between them. Maybe not, she admitted, but I would have known who I was opening my door to. Jean sighed and sat opposite her. The firelight painted deep lines across his face, the kind that come from years of grief and guilt. When my wife died, everything on that ranch turned to dust. Money, land, men, none of it mattered. I thought if I could disappear, maybe the pain would too. Emma looked at him, her voice barely a whisper. Pain doesn't vanish when you run. It just waits for you to stop. He smiled faintly, sad but real. You sound like you've learned that the hard way. I have. The wind outside picked up, rattling the shutters. For a long time, they sat in silence, both staring into the flickering fire, the only witness to everything unsaid between them. Then James spoke again, softer now. Carver's right. They'll sell the ranch if I don't return soon. But the thought of going back feels like walking into someone else's life. Emma's fingers traced the rim of her cup. Maybe that life's waiting for you to make it your own again. He studied her face, searching for something, forgiveness, maybe, or courage. And what about you? If I go back? She looked up, meeting his gaze. Then go. Don't stay because you think you owe me something. I don't, he said. But he stopped himself. The words were there on the edge of his tongue, but fear kept them locked away. Emma rose, turning toward the window. The snowfall had thickened, flakes swirling softly under the moonlight. Storms coming back, she murmured. James stood behind her, his voice quiet, almost pleading. Maybe this time, we face it together. She didn't answer right away. Just watched the snow drift past the glass, fragile, relentless, beautiful. Then she said, almost to herself, together's a dangerous word. James hollered. He stepped closer, close enough for the warmth of his presence to reach her, but not close enough to touch. So, is alone. The fire crackled. A single spark rose and vanished into the smoke. The snow had fallen all night, wrapping the forest in silence. When Emma opened the door that morning, the world looked untouched, as if yesterday's troubles had been buried under a blanket of white. But not everything could be covered so easily. James was already outside, loading the small sled with what few belongings he had. His movements were steady, deliberate, and painfully quiet. Sarah stood nearby, her wool cloak pulled up to her chin. Papa, she said softly, are we leaving? James paused, resting a hand on her shoulder. Not yet, he said, but soon. Emma watched from the doorway, her arms crossed over her chest. You're really going back? He turned to face her, snowflakes melting in his hair. It's my land, my people. I can't keep running from it. She nodded, but her expression didn't soften. And what about what you found here? His gaze lingered on her for a long moment. The cabin, the smoke curling from the chimney, the life that had somehow grown between them. That's the part I'm not ready to leave. Emma stepped outside, boots crunching in the snow. Then don't. Jean smiled faintly, sadness flickering behind it. You know I have to. You always have a choice, she said quietly. He looked at her, really looked. Do I? Because if I stay, I'm a coward running from duty. And if I go, I'm a fool walking away from the only peace I've known. Emma's breath clouded between them. Maybe peace isn't a place, James. Maybe it's a person. He took a slow step closer. The air between them felt charged, alive. Then tell me to stay, he said, voice barely more than a whisper. Emma's heart pounded, but she couldn't speak. The words burned on her tongue. But something, fear, pride, love, kept them there. Instead, she said softly, you'll do what's right. You always do. He nodded, jaw tightening. I'll leave tomorrow. The snow will ease by then. Sarah tugged at his sleeve. Will Miss Emma come with us? James looked at Emma, waiting. She glanced at the forest, the cabin, the memories carved into every board and stone. This is my home, she said finally. Sarah's face fell. But you could have a new one. Emma knelt and brushed a strand of hair from the girl's cheek. Homes aren't built from wood and nails, sweetheart. They're built from people who stay. Sarah nodded, not fully understanding, but feeling the weight of it all the same. James turned away, his breath trembling. Then I guess this is goodbye, he said. But Emma didn't answer. She just looked at him standing there in the snow. The man who had arrived at her door half-dead, and who now looked more alive than ever, and for the first time in years. She didn't know what hurt more, the silence, or the thought of losing it. The wind rose, carrying the faint cry of a distant hawk. The day stretched before them, white and endless, like the road waiting to be chosen. By dawn, the sled was ready. The storm had cleared, leaving the sky pale and endless. The forest shimmered under a thin mist, every branch heavy with snow. James stood beside the horse, tightening the straps, his breath rising in slow white clouds. Emma watched from the doorway, the same doorway where she had once found him, half frozen and bleeding. Now he stood tall, steady, the man he had been before grief hollowed him out. Sarah climbed onto the sled, clutching her small wooden horse, the one Emma had mended for her. I'll miss you, Miss Emma, she said, her voice small in the morning stillness. Emma managed a smile. And I'll miss you, sweetheart. Be brave for your father. I will. James met Emma's gaze one last time. There was so much he wanted to say, things that didn't fit into words. Gratitude, regret, love. Thank you, he said finally, for saving us. Emma shook her head gently. You saved yourselves. I just opened the door. He smiled faintly, that quiet, broken smile she had learned to read like a story. Goodbye, Emma. She stood there as the sled began to move, the sound of hooves muffled by snow. They passed the fence they had fixed together, the line of it cutting across the white hills like a promise. Then the forest swallowed them whole. For a long time, Emma stayed where she was, her hands trembling against the frame of the door. The cabin was too quiet again, too still. She stirred the fire, though it didn't need it, and sat by the window, staring at the empty road. Hours passed. The sun climbed high, melting small crystals from the roof, the drops falling like ticking seconds. She told herself she'd done the right thing, that letting go was strength, not loss. Then, faintly, she heard it, the sound of hooves. At first, she thought it was just the wind playing tricks. But then it came again, closer, faster. Emma stood, heart racing. Outside, through the drifting snow, a lone rider appeared. James. His coat was dusted white, his hat pulled low, but there was no mistaking him. He rode hard until he reached the cabin and stopped just a few feet away. Emma stepped out, the cold biting her cheeks. What are you doing? She called. He dismounted, breathless. I tried to keep going, he said, his voice raw. But every mile felt wrong. Every step away from here felt like leaving something behind I wasn't ready to lose. Emma's eyes filled with tears. She didn't fight this time. And what about your ranch? He smiled, small, steady, certain. A man can have land, gold, and 100 fences. But none of it means a damn thing if there's no one to come home to. For a moment, neither of them moved. Snow fell softly between them, catching in their hair, glowing in the pale light. Then Emma took a single step forward. You came back. Jeans nodded. If you'll have me. She smiled, slow, trembling, but real. I never asked you to leave. Dust swirled across the small frontier town of Dry Creek as the sun bled over the horizon. The crowd outside the saloon was already restless, voices rising with laughter and whiskey. Inside, a wooden sign read, Marriage Lottery, $5 a ticket. Winner gets a bride. Tobias Crow stood in the corner, hat low, boots coated with trail dust. He hadn't planned on being here. 3 years of hard work on a ranch had earned him little more than silence and scars. But $5 was a small price for something different, even if it was foolish. Last ticket, mister, the bartender said, waving the stub of paper. Tobias reached into his coat. I'll take it, he muttered. The crowd erupted when the drawing began. A sheriff's deputy spun a tin drum, pulled a slip, and read the name aloud. Winner is Tobias Crow. Laughter filled the room. Lucky bastard. Someone yelled. Hope she ain't got a beard. The doors creaked open. Everyone turned. A tall shadow filled the frame, a woman, proud and broad-shouldered, her eyes sharp as a hawk's. Her skin caught the light of the setting sun. Deep bronze, marked by wind and strength. She wore leather bands on her arms and stood a full head taller than Tobias. The saloon went silent. Then came the whispers. Apache, she's one of them. Lord help him. Tobias froze. The woman, Atsa, didn't flinch. She stepped forward, gaze steady, meeting his eyes without fear. The sheriff cleared his throat. By law of this county, this woman is yours. Crow, you signed the paper. Murmurs spread again. Some men laughed. Others spat on the floor. Atsa spoke, her English firm but cold. No man owns me, but I keep promise. Her words cut through the noise like a blade. Tobias swallowed hard. Then I'll keep mine too, he said quietly. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying dust and the echo of laughter. Two strangers, bound by a foolish bet and the cruelty of others, walked out of Dry Creek together. The sunset burned behind them, painting their shadows long and uncertain. No one in town thought they'd last a day, but destiny had other plans. The desert swallowed sound. Only the wind spoke, whispering through the sage and brittle grass. Tobias Crow walked beside the woman who now, by law and luck, bore his name. She moved like the earth itself, heavy, calm, and proud. Her shadow stretched long against the sand. Behind them, Dry Creek shimmered. In the dying light, a smudge of smoke and laughter disappearing into the horizon. Tobias had never been a man for company, but tonight, the silence between him and Atsa felt heavier than any crowd. Do you even know where you're going? He asked. Yes. Her voice was low, deliberate. He waited, but she said no more. The night cooled fast. Tobias stopped near a dry riverbed and began gathering sticks. Atsa stood nearby, arms crossed, watching him. He could feel her gaze, not judgmental, just cautious. When he struck a match, the light flared between them, painting her face in copper and shadow. You don't talk much, he said. You talk too much, she answered flatly. He chuckled quietly. Guess we'll balance each other out. For a long while, neither spoke. The fire cracked and spit. Above them, the sky opened wide, black velvet, crowded with stars. Tobias thought of his ranch, empty now, maybe already taken by another man. Everything he'd worked for had turned to dust. All that remained was a paper contract and a stranger beside him. Atsa sat across the fire, sharpening a knife she had hidden beneath her belt. The blade caught the light, flashing red gold. Tobias tried not to stare. You planning to use that? Only if someone needs teaching. He smiled faintly. Hope you're not looking at me. Her eyes lifted, cool and steady. Not yet. He leaned back, the fire warming his boots. You're something else? You know that. Atsa didn't answer, but he thought, just for a moment. He saw the corner of her mouth twitch. As the wind rose, carrying the scent of rain, Tobias felt a strange peace settling. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about tomorrow. Just the fire, the stars, and the woman across from him, a woman who didn't belong to anyone. When he finally drifted to sleep, the world was quiet, but Atsa didn't rest. She sat awake, staring toward the west, where 3 distant lanterns flickered like watchful eyes. She whispered something in Apache, words lost to the wind. Then she reached for her knife and waited for dawn. The sun broke over the desert like spilled fire. Tobias woke to the sound of hooves, faint, distant, but real. Atsa was already standing, her face turned to the ridge, her hand gripping the knife she never let far from reach. They've been following since night, she said quietly. Tobias rose fast, brushing sand off his coat. Who? She didn't answer, just pointed. Far out across the plain, 3 riders cut through the dust. The glint of rifles caught the light. Tobias's stomach turned cold. You know them. Her jaw tightened. Men who sold me. They come to claim again. The weight of her words hung in the morning air. Tobias reached for his revolver, old, worn, but loaded. They're after you? He asked. Her gaze met his, unflinching. They think I'm property. And now so are you. They packed in silence. The fire was crushed under sand. Within minutes, they were riding hard west toward the canyon line. The desert wind tore at their faces. Grit bit into their eyes. Behind them, the riders grew larger. Tobias' wrist glanced back. We can't outrun them forever. Atsa didn't slow. Then we don't. What do you mean? She pulled the reins sharply, turning her horse toward the canyon mouth. We fight where the land remembers us. The canyon walls swallowed them, red and narrow like an open wound. The sound of hooves echoed, close now, too close. Tobias slid from his saddle and took position behind a rock. He could hear the traders shouting, laughing, confident. Atsa moved like a ghost between the stones, setting her stance, bow in hand. You shoot? She asked. Tobias cocked his revolver. I shoot, then shoot true. The first rider appeared at the bend, his grin bright in the sun. A crack split the air. Tobias fired once. The man fell from his horse. 2 more came past, shouting, returning fire. Bullets sparked off stone. Atsa released an arrow, silent, deadly. It found its mark clean through the chest. Then quiet, only wind and the smell of gunpowder. Tobias leaned against a rock, breathing hard. His hands trembled. You've done this before. Atsa's face was calm, enough to survive. They searched the fallen men, finding food, water, and a half-burned contract. Her name scrawled across it in crooked ink. Tobias looked at it, then at her. Guess that's the paper that made you mine. She tore it in 2. Paper doesn't own me. He watched her walk away, the torn pieces drifting into the wind. Something inside him shifted, not fear, not pity, something deeper. For the first time, Tobias Crow realized he hadn't won a prize in some cruel game. He'd been given a mirror. As dusk settled, they rode again side by side, to silhouettes against a bleeding sky. Somewhere ahead lay freedom, or death, but either way, it would be their choice. The desert stretched endlessly before them, painted in hues of gold and rust. Each step sent a small cloud of dust swirling around Tobias's boots. His throat was dry, his shirt clung to him, and yet, beside him, Atsa walked like a figure carved from the earth itself, unbroken, silent, her gaze fixed on the horizon. They had been traveling for 3 days without shelter, the last town they left behind with whispers and stares. A white man and a giant Apache woman. Tobias heard someone mutter before they rode off. He tried to laugh it away, but the sound died in his throat. Now, in the barren valley, those words echoed again, heavier this time. Atsa suddenly stopped. She knelt beside a cluster of rocks and touched one of them, a circle carved by human hands long ago. Her eyes softened. My people called this place Tashin Kai, the Valley of the Dead Wind, she said quietly. Spirits travel here when they cannot find peace. Tobias swallowed. And you believe they're still around? She turned to him, her expression unreadable. They never left. For a moment, Tobias thought he saw something flicker in her gaze, sorrow. Or maybe memory. He sat beside her, brushing sand from his hat. You talk like you've been here before. I was, he said, as a child. My mother brought me here to teach me the names of the stars. Then, the white men came. They said they wanted peace. They took her first. The silence between them thickened like smoke. Tobias didn't know what to say. His words always felt small next to her truth. Atsa rose and looked around. We must move. The wind will turn soon. But before they could take another step, Tobias noticed something on the ridge, a glint of metal, a rifle. He grabbed Atsa's arm and pulled her down behind a rock. 3 riders appeared, silhouettes against the burning sky. One of them shouted, "We know you're down there, half-breed lovers. The woman belongs to us." Tobias felt his heart pounding. Atsa's face hardened, not with fear, but fury. She pulled a small blade from her belt. They followed us from the town, she muttered. Traitors. They want to take me back. Tobias clenched his jaw. Over my dead body. Atsa looked at him for a long moment, then nodded once. Then stand ready. The wind shifted, carrying sand and the smell of gunpowder. The first shot rang out, sharp and cruel, echoing across the valley. Tobias ducked behind a boulder, returning fire. Atsa moved like a shadow, fast and precise, her strength unleashed in silence. The desert roared alive, and the Valley of the Dead Wind claimed new souls. The echo of gunfire faded into the wind. Smoke drifted across the valley, curling like spirits searching for breath. Tobias pressed his back to the rock, reloading his rifle with trembling hands. How many do you think? He hissed. Atsa crouched beside him, eyes sharp. 3, maybe 4. But the desert hides more than shadows. Another shot cracked the air. The bullet ricocheted off the stone inches from Tobias's ear. He winced but didn't pull away. Atsa rose slightly, gauging the direction. Her tall frame half silhouetted against the burning sky. They'll try to flank us, she murmured. Stay behind me. He wanted to argue, to insist he could protect her. But when she stepped forward, blade glinting in the light, her presence silenced him. There was something in the way she moved. Precise, powerful, calm. Tobias realized then that fear had no home in her. 2 riders charged from the left ridge. Tobias aimed, fired. One fell. The other turned, raising his pistol. Before the man could pull the trigger, Atsa was already there. She moved like lightning, slashing the reins, pulling the man down. Her knife flashing once. The sound that followed was swallowed by the wind. Tobias stared. You killed him. Atsa didn't answer. She stood over the fallen man, breathing slowly, her hair whipped by the desert gusts. He would have taken us both, she said at last. Her tone was flat, not cold, just final. When the last shot echoed and silence returned, Tobias stepped out, scanning the ridge. The traitors were gone. Only dust and spent shells remained. The sun hung low, bleeding into the horizon. Atsa knelt beside the fire she lit from a spark stone. The smoke rose thin and gray. Tobias sat across from her, his heart still pounding. You've done this before, he said quietly. She nodded. Too many times, her eyes reflected the flames, bright, wounded, alive. They sold me when I was 15. Said I wasn't worth keeping because I fought too hard. Tobias said nothing. The flames cracked between them. He reached out slowly, touching her wrist. For a moment, she didn't move. Then she looked at him. And in her gaze was something fierce yet fragile, the kind of strength born only from loss. The wind's changing, she whispered. Tomorrow, we'll reach the canyon. After that, no man will follow us. Tobias stared into the fire. Then tomorrow, we start over. Atsa's lips curved into the faintest smile. If the land allows it. Above them, the desert sky deepened into indigo. Stars began to bloom, countless, ancient, silent. The valley of the dead wine slept again, but beneath its surface, something new had taken root, not just survival, but trust. By noon the next day, the desert began to change. The flat, endless sand gave way to sharp cliffs and scarred stone. The wind howled through narrow passages like the cry of something ancient and unseen. Atsa stopped, raising her hand. "We're close," she said, "the canyon of forgotten voices." Tobias squinted against the glare. "Why do they call it that?" "Because," she answered softly, "when the wind blows just right, it sounds like the dead are speaking." They led their horses down a steep trail, each step crunching on gravel and bone-dry earth. The canyon opened wide before them, a maze of red rock and shadow carved by time itself. Tobias had seen many places in his years as a ranch hand, but nothing like this. The air felt sacred, as if the ground carried memory. Atsa moved with reverence. She touched the walls as they walked, whispering words in her language. Tobias watched, saying nothing. He felt like an intruder in a place too old for him. They reached a small plateau where a spring trickled between stones. Atsa knelt, cupping the water in her hands. "Drink," she said. "It will keep you safe here." Tobias obeyed, the water cold and sweet. As they rested, she began to hum, low, steady, like the heartbeat of the canyon itself. The sound seemed to awaken something around them. The wind shifted, faint echoes rippled through the cliffs, carrying fragments of long-forgotten voices. Tobias froze. "What is that?" Atsa's eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. "My ancestors," she whispered. "They watch those who walk with purpose, and they curse those who walk in greed." He shivered, though the air was warm. For the first time, Tobias felt the full weight of what she carried, not just strength, but centuries of silence and pain. As dusk approached, they built a small fire near the edge of the canyon. Tobias leaned back, gazing at the stars. "You ever think about leaving all this behind? The memories, the past?" Atsa's gaze remained on the fire. "If I leave it behind, who am I? The world took my name once. I won't let it take my soul." Her words struck him harder than he expected. He stared at her, at the firelight dancing across her face, at the quiet pride in her eyes, and something inside him shifted. "You're not what I expected," he said softly. Atsa looked at him, a trace of a smile ghosting across her lips. "Neither are you." The canyon wind rose again, whispering through the cliffs, the voices blending into something almost like a song. For a moment, they both listened. In that sound, Tobias didn't hear the dead. He heard something else. Hope. Night fell like a curtain of velvet across the canyon. The fire burned low, its glow flickering against the stone walls, turning them into shifting ghosts. Tobias lay awake, listening to the distant sound of wind rushing through the narrow passes. It almost sounded like voices, too faint to understand, yet impossible to ignore. Atsa sat across from him, sharpening her blade by the light. Her movements were deliberate, rhythmic, steady. "You should sleep," she said without looking up. "I can't," Tobias admitted. "Feels like the canyon's watching." She paused, glancing toward the cliffs. "It is." Before he could ask what she meant, the horses snorted nervously. Their ears twitched. Atsa rose instantly, her expression turning hard. Tobias reached for his rifle. The sound came again, a faint clatter of rock. Then another. From the darkness, 3 figures appeared, their outlines tall and lean, faces half hidden under hoods. One of them raised a torch, the light revealing bone necklaces and painted hands. Tobias's heart pounded. "Apache," he whispered. Atsa shook her head. "Outcasts. Those who serve no tribe." The strangers spoke in low tones, their eyes fixed on Atsa. One stepped forward, his voice harsh. "You should not be here, daughter of fire. This place belongs to the dead." Atsa's jaw tightened. "The dead do not own what they cannot protect." The man sneered. "Then you defy them. You bring a white man into sacred ground." Tobias felt the weight of their stares, judgment, anger, disbelief. He wanted to speak, to explain, but Atsa lifted her hand. He walks with me. His blood carries no greed. The outcast laughed. No greed? Then why does he still breathe on stolen land? In one swift motion, Atsa stepped between Tobias and the men. Her height dwarfed them all. Because he fights beside me. And if the spirits disapprove, they will take him themselves. For a long moment, silence ruled the canyon. Then the leader lowered his torch. You are bold, Atsa of the Red Wind. The valley has not forgotten you. He looked at Tobias. Nor has it forgiven his kind. Without another word, the men vanished into the darkness, their footsteps swallowed by stone. Tobias exhaled shakily. Who were they? Atsa sat back by the fire. The lost ones, warriors who refused peace. They hate what they cannot understand. He looked at her face, the firelight glinting off her eyes. And you, what do you understand about me? Atsa hesitated. The wind whistled between them. Enough to know you don't run anymore. Her words hung there, quiet but sharp. Tobias met her gaze, realizing for the first time that somewhere along this brutal road, his fear had turned into something else, something he couldn't yet name. The canyon sighed as the fire died. In the darkness, they sat side by side, not speaking. Above them, the stars pulsed bright. Against the endless sky, silent witnesses. To two souls learning that survival wasn't just about living. It was about belonging. Dawn spilled across the canyon like liquid gold. The fire had burned to ash, leaving only thin ribbons of smoke that curled into the cold morning air. Atsa was the first to rise. She stretched silently, her silhouette catching the pale light, muscles drawn tight beneath worn leather. Tobias stirred beside her, groaning softly. Time to move, she said. He rubbed his eyes, blinking at the crimson horizon. Feels like we just closed them. The desert doesn't wait for the weary, Atsa replied, fastening her belt and checking her blade. They packed in silence and led their horses out of the canyon. The cliffs rose like walls behind them, silent, watching. Tobias turned once to look back. The canyon seemed smaller now, almost peaceful, as if it had given them permission to leave. The land ahead was wide and wild, rolling dunes and broken stones stretching to the horizon. By midday, heat shimmered off the ground like glass. Tobias wiped sweat from his brow. Remind me again why we're walking straight into the sun. Atsa gave a faint smile. Because west is freedom, and freedom burns brighter than comfort. Her words hung in the air. He didn't know whether to admire her or fear her for saying them so easily. As the day wore on, they found traces of others, a broken wagon wheel, boot prints, bones half buried in sand. Tobias crouched to study them. Travelers. Atsa shook her head. Hunters, the kind who sell people. The thought made his stomach twist. He'd heard of slavers roaming these lands, rounding up natives and drifters alike for border trade. He looked at her. We'll avoid them. Her tone turned grave. No, we'll confront them if we must. Some chains must be broken in the open. By the time the sun began to fall, the desert cooled and the wind turned sharp. They stopped near a cluster of stones that formed a natural shelter. Tobias built a small fire while Atsa stood watch. When he looked up, she was gazing west again, her face unreadable. You ever think of going back? He asked. To what? She said quietly. There's nothing left behind me. Tobias hesitated, then nodded. Guess we're both ghosts then. She turned to him, her eyes softening. No, ghosts wander without purpose. We walked toward one. For a long moment, the silence between them was warm, not empty, but alive. The flames danced between their faces, casting shadows that looked almost like hands reaching out. Tobias didn't move. He didn't need to. For the first time since they'd met, the air between them felt like something close to peace. But peace never lasted long on this land. Somewhere beyond the dunes, a distant sound broke the stillness, a horse's whinny, sharp and startled. Atsa's head snapped up. Her hand went to her knife. They found us, she said. The sound grew louder, hooves pounding across the sand, metal clinking faintly in rhythm. Tobias's pulse quickened. He kicked dirt over the fire, plunging them into half-darkness. Atsa crouched low, eyes flashing amber in the moonlight. From the ridge came silhouettes, 5 riders, rough and lean, rifles slung over their shoulders. The leader, a man with a red bandana and a scar running from his lip to his ear, reined in his horse and grinned down at them. Well, he drawled. The lost cowboy and his prize. Tobias stepped forward, hand near his gun. You're trespassing. The man laughed. These lands don't belong to anyone, least of all a man hiding behind an Apache woman. Atsa's voice was calm, but carried steel. Leave, now. He tilted his head. You must be Atsa. Heard a lot about you. Big talk about the giant girl who thinks she's a warrior. The insult barely left his mouth before she moved. One fluid motion, a blur of muscle and fury. She grabbed his leg and yanked him clean off his horse, slamming him into the dirt. The others shouted, raising their rifles. Tobias fired first, the shot echoing off the rocks. One man fell. Another turned tail. The night exploded into chaos, horses screaming, sand flying, gunfire flashing like lightning. Tobias ducked behind a boulder, reloading, while Atsa waded into the fight with primal grace. She caught a man's rifle mid-swing and snapped it in two. Her strength unbelievable. When the last rider fell silent, only the sound of wind and heavy breathing remained. Tobias looked around, heart hammering. You all right? Atsa wiped blood from her cheek, then nodded. They were scouts. More will come. Tobias knelt beside the scarred leader, who was still alive but fading. Who sent you? The man spat into the sand. The buyer said you've got what belongs to him. His gaze flicked toward Atsa, then died out like a snuff flame. They buried the bodies before dawn. Neither spoke much. When the first light touched the desert, Atsa stood over the graves and whispered something in her tongue, a prayer or perhaps a curse. Tobias packed the horses, glancing at her. You didn't have to fight like that. She looked at him, eyes fierce. I don't fight because I have to. I fight because I remember. They rode west in silence. The air was cooler now, the wind gentle. Tobias watched her from behind, her shoulders broad, her hair loose, her presence filling the world around her. He realized then that she was more than the legend people whispered about. She was the living truth of this land, wild, scarred, and untamed. When night fell again, they camped by a dry riverbed. Tobias sat beside her, the stars reflected in her eyes. You ever think freedom's just another word? He asked. She smiled faintly. No, freedom's breath. You just forget to breathe sometimes. He looked at her for a long time, and in the hush between them, the desert didn't seem so empty anymore. The sun bled red over the ridges, painting the sky in fire. Tobias and Atsa rode silently, their shadows stretching long over the cracked earth. The desert was quiet now, too quiet. Even the coyotes seemed to sense something was coming. By noon, they found refuge beneath an ancient stone arch that rose from the ground like a gateway to another world. Atsa dismounted, her feet silent on the dust. Tobias followed, watching her trace the rock surface with her hand. Symbols, old Apache carvings, covered it like forgotten prayers. My people carved these before the wars, she said quietly, before they were forced to sell their names for food. Tobias ran his fingers over the same lines, rough beneath his skin. You talk like you were there. She smiled faintly. Sometimes I think I was. The stories stay inside you, even when the world tries to take them away. They built a small fire and shared the last of their rations, dried beans and coffee bitter enough to sting. The silence between them wasn't awkward anymore. It was something sacred. Tobias found himself stealing glances at her, the way her hair caught the light, the way she moved with quiet certainty, as if the land itself breathed with her. Then, from beyond the ridge, came the sound, drums. Slow, steady, distant. Atsa froze, her face tightening. That's not raiders, he said. That's my people. Before Tobias could speak, riders appeared, 6 of them, all Apache, their faces painted in red and black. At their head rode a woman nearly as tall as Etza, her expression a mix of sorrow and command. Etza stepped forward. "Sister," the woman said, "you left us in anger. I left in chains," Etza replied, "and I won't wear them again." The woman dismounted, removing a small pouch from her belt. "The elders sent me. Your debt has been paid. The man who sold you is dead. You are free, Etza." Tobias felt the words like a blow. Free, it should have been a victory. But the way Etza stood, still, unreadable, told him this was not freedom easily taken. The woman's gaze shifted toward him. "But freedom has a price. If you go back to the white man, they'll call you traitor. If you stay with him, you can never return to us." Etza looked between them, her eyes like storm clouds. "And if I go back, then your name is restored," the woman said softly, "and he dies." Tobias's breath caught. His hand instinctively moved toward his revolver. But Etza raised a hand, calm, steady. "No." The wind howled through the canyon, carrying dust and silence. For the first time, Tobias saw fear in her, not for herself, but for him. She turned to her sister. "Tell the elders this. I will not trade one cage for another." The woman nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. "Then may the desert take what's left of you." She turned her horse and rode away, her warriors following without another word. When the sound of hooves faded, Tobias finally exhaled. "Etza." She didn't look at him. "Freedom?" she whispered. Night fell fast that evening, as if the desert itself wanted to bury the day's memories. Tobias and Etza camped without fire. The stars stretched endless above them, sharp, cold, indifferent. Tobias sat with his rifle across his knees, staring into the dark. "You could have gone back," he said softly. "You would have been safe." Etza shook her head. "Safety isn't freedom. You taught me that." He gave a tired laugh. "I'm not sure I ever believed it myself." For a long while, only the wind spoke. Then, the faint jingle of metal. Horses again. Etza rose instantly, her hand gripping her spear. From the shadows, a dozen riders emerged, the slavers, returned for vengeance. Their leader, a heavy man with a broad head and a cruel grin, lifted a lantern. "Well, look here," he sneered. "The giant and her pet cowboy. Should have sold you both when I had the chance." Tobias stood, calm but ready. "You're not taking her." The man smirked. "I'm taking everything." The desert exploded. Gunfire flashed. Horses screamed. Tobias rolled behind a fallen log, firing blind into the chaos. Etza charged into the storm, her body cutting through the firelight like a living myth, unstoppable, furious. She grabbed one slaver and threw him clear off his saddle. Another lunged with a knife, but she caught his wrist and twisted until bones snapped. "Tobias!" she shouted as a bullet grazed her shoulder. He sprinted to her side, dragging her behind a rock. Blood seeped down her arm, dark and thick. "They'll circle us," Tobias said. "We can't stay." Etza's eyes burned like embers. "Then we end it here." She pushed herself up before he could stop her. The slavers closed in, circling like wolves. Tobias joined her, revolver in hand. And for a moment, just a heartbeat, the two of them stood shoulder to shoulder. Small man and towering woman, defying the whole damn desert. When the last bullet fired, silence fell heavy as ash. Smoke drifted through the moonlight. Around them lay only bodies and dust. Tobias dropped his gun, hands trembling. Etza leaned on him, her breathing shallow. "Don't you die on me," he whispered. She smiled faintly. "Not yet." They stayed like that until dawn, the sun rising crimson over the battlefield. When its first light touched her face, she stood again broken. "Where will we go?" Tobias asked. Etza looked west, toward the horizon. "Where no one owns the land, where no one owns us." He took her hand, rough, strong, warm. "Then that's home." They rode together until the desert opened into green. Hills, water, the faint promise of a settlement. People stopped and stared as the giant Apache woman and her cowboy passed, side by side, silent but proud. For the first time in his life, Tobias didn't feel alone, and when he glanced at her, he saw not a prize or a burden, but a partner, a force of nature who had chosen him against every law of man and tribe. That night, as the stars returned, Atzo whispered, "You won more than a lottery, cowboy." The desert wind rolled through Ember Valley, lifting red dust that shimmered like embers beneath the morning sun. A lone rider appeared on the horizon, a woman in a faded traveling coat, her head pulled low, her posture straight despite the miles behind her. Her name was Clara Duval, and she carried more regrets than belongings. She had come from the east, chasing a letter and a whisper of purpose. "We need a teacher at the Row Place. Children here deserve a chance to read, to write, maybe to hope again." Hero, Amber Creek Ranch. By the time Clara reached the ranch, her horse was trembling, and her canteen nearly empty. The land opened wide before her, red cliffs, thorny brush, and a cluster of weathered cabins surrounded by a fence that leaned like an old man. Children darted between the posts, shouting and laughing, chasing a stray chicken across the yard. There were 7 of them, all shapes and sizes, some barefoot, some wearing boots to sizes too big. A girl with tangled hair waved at her shyly. Then Clara saw him, Elias Rowe, the man who had written the letter. He stood by the corral, sleeves rolled to his elbows, sunlight cutting across his scarred forearm. His face was stern, but his eyes carried the quiet patience of someone who'd seen loss and learned to live with it. "You must be Miss Duval," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. His voice was steady, low, the kind that could calm horses or silence arguments. "Kid's been counting down the days. They need someone who knows her letters better than I do." Clara managed a tired smile. "And how long have you been teaching them, Mr. Rowe?" He chuckled. "Since the day the first one showed up on my doorstep hungry. I reckon I'm better at fixing fences than spelling." The children gathered close, studying her as though she'd stepped out of a storybook. One handed her a wildflower, roots and all. Another held out a crumpled drawing: the sun, a horse, a crooked house. That evening, as dusk painted the valley in amber light, Clara watched from the porch. The children sat her on a wooden table inside, laughing as Elias poured soup into chipped bowls. He wasn't their father, not by blood, but in every look, every gesture, there was a tenderness that couldn't be taught. And for the first time in years, Clara felt something stir, something fragile and dangerous. The doctors back east had said her womb was barren. But here, in this wild place, surrounded by laughter and dust and the smell of bread, Clara wondered if maybe, just maybe, her heart wasn't. When Elias looked up and caught her watching, he smiled. Not the polite kind, the knowing kind, the kind that promised this was only the beginning. Morning came early to Ember Valley. The first rays of light spilled across the red hills, turning the ranch into a painting of gold and clay. The air smelled of coffee smoke and horses. Clara woke to the sound of laughter outside, the children already at their chores. When she stepped out of the small cabin Elias had given her, the valley stretched quiet and endless before her, as if waiting to see what she'd do next. Inside the main house, Elias was pouring coffee into 2 tin cups. "You sleep any?" he asked without looking up. "A little," Clara said. "The coyotes were generous enough to sing me a lullaby." He smiled faintly. "You'll get used to them. They're part of the choir out here." She accepted the cup, their fingers brushing for the briefest second, a small, unexpected warmth. Then, setting her books under her arm, she walked toward the barn where the children were waiting. The makeshift classroom was nothing more than a few benches, a chalkboard nailed to the wall, and sunlight sneaking through the cracks in the wood. Yet the children sat upright, eyes wide, ready. Some held broken pencils, others clutched bits of charcoal. Clara cleared her throat. "Good morning. My name is Miss Duval. I'm here to help you learn words, how to write them." how to read them, and maybe even how to use them to change your world. A boy in the back raised his hand. Can words really do that, ma'am? She smiled. They already have. Every letter, every story, someone once dreamed it, just like you can. The lessons began slow, clumsy, full of laughter and dust. She taught them the alphabet, drew shapes in chalk, corrected gently when they stumbled. When one of the younger girls, Lottie, began to cry over a misspelled word, Clara knelt beside her. It's not about being perfect, she whispered. It's about trying again. Elias watched from the doorway, silent. He'd seen many things in his years, storms, fires, even death, but never this kind of calm strength. The woman who had arrived just yesterday, worn and tired, now stood before his children like she'd belonged there all along. By noon, the walls of the barn echoed with laughter. For the first time in a long while, Ember Valley felt alive. When the children ran off for lunch, Clara turned to see Elias, still standing by the door. "You've built something good here," she said softly. He shook his head, "Just trying to keep them safe. But maybe now with you here, they might have more than safety." Their eyes met, a brief, unspoken pause that said too much and not enough. Outside, the wind carried dust across the yard. But inside that barn, something fragile and new had begun to take root. Evening fell soft and slow over Ember Valley. The sky blazed orange, fading into violet where the desert met the horizon. The day's laughter had quieted. The children were asleep in the bunkhouse, their dreams safe under the hum of the crickets. Clara sat by the fire pit outside, her book resting closed on her lap. She watched the flames twist in the wind, each spark vanishing into the dark, like tiny prayers swallowed by the night. Elias approached quietly, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. He handed her one, then settled on the opposite log. The firelight flickered against his weathered face, softening the lines carved by years of work and worry. "They haven't stopped talking about your lesson," he said after a while. "Said you made the alphabet sound like an adventure." Clara chuckled softly. "Then they've got good imaginations. Half of teaching is pretending the world is bigger than it looks." Elias stirred the fire with a stick, watching the embers glow. "World is bigger than it looks," he said. "Most folks just stop looking." Silence settled, comfortable, heavy with things unsaid. After a moment, he looked at her. "Back east, what brought you this far? Not many come all the way out here unless they're running from something." Clara hesitated. The question hung in the air, fragile. Finally, she said, "Once, I thought I'd have a family, a home. But life had other plans." Elias nodded slowly, understanding more than he said. "I know that kind of loss." She met his eyes. "The children, are they all yours?" He shook his head, smiling faintly. "No blood of mine, just kids that needed a roof and a meal. Some came from the rail lines, some left behind after the fever. You'd be surprised how many end up wandering these parts alone." Clara's fingers tightened around her cup. "And you took them all in." "Someone had to." He glanced toward the bunkhouse, the warm glow spilling from its windows. "They give this place a reason to keep breathing. Guess we all need that." For a long while they said nothing, only the crackle of the fire, the wind whispering through the dry grass. Then Elias added quietly, almost to himself, "You said you thought you'd have a family once. Maybe you still could. Not the way you planned, but maybe better." Clara turned toward him, her eyes catching the firelight. There was no pity in his tone, only simple truth, the kind that reaches straight to the heart. The flames flickered between them, painting gold on their faces. Somewhere deep inside, Clara felt that locked door creak open again, just a little wider than before. Dawn crept slowly across Ember Valley, pale and cold. The laughter of yesterday seemed far away now, replaced by the uneasy stillness that comes before bad news. Clara was preparing the morning lesson when she heard hooves sharp, deliberate, not like Elias's easy ride. She stepped outside, just as 2 men on horses appeared at the gate. They wore dust-coated coats, and city hats that didn't belong in this country. Elias met them halfway, wiping his hands on his trousers, eyes narrowing against the glare. Clara could tell by the way his jaw tightened that he already knew this wasn't a friendly visit. The taller man dismounted first. "Mr. Rowe," he asked, voice crisp. "Official. Territorial authorities. Santa Fe, we've had concerns brought to our attention." "Concerns?" Elias repeated, calm but guarded. "Yes, sir," the man said, pulling a folded paper from his pocket. "You've been housing multiple minors without legal guardianship. No record of adoption or placement. Some of these children were listed as missing after the cholera outbreak 2 winters ago." The words landed heavy, like stones. Clara felt her stomach twist. Elias didn't flinch. Those kids were starving. Nobody came looking for him. "So, I did what any man with a roof and a conscience would do." The second official, younger, spoke up. "That's not the point, sir. Without proper documentation, it's considered unlawful custody." The children had gathered near the porch, wide-eyed and silent. Lottie clutched Clara's skirt, trembling. Clara stepped forward before she could think. "They're not property," she said sharply. "They're human beings who finally found safety." The taller official gave her a measured look. "Miss, I understand your sympathy, but the law is the law. We'll return in 2 weeks. Mr. Rowe must either file official guardianship papers through the county court, or the children will be relocated to government care." Relocated. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. When the riders turned and left, dust rising behind them, the ranch fell silent. Elias stood motionless for a long moment, the paper crushed in his hand. Clara approached quietly. "There must be a way," she whispered. He looked at her then, really looked, like a man measuring the weight of hope. "Maybe there is," he said softly, "but it'll take more than good intentions." She met his gaze steady. "Then we'll find it, together." For the first time since she'd arrived, she saw fear flicker in his eyes, not for himself, but for the children. And as the morning wind swept through Ember Valley, carrying dust and dread in equal measure, Clara knew that whatever was coming next would test everything they'd begun to build. The day after the officials left, Ember Valley felt different, quieter, as if even the wind held its breath. The children went about their chores, but their laughter had dimmed. Fear, once a stranger here, now sat at every table. Elias spent the morning in the barn, hammering nails into boards that didn't need fixing. Clara watched him from the doorway, knowing he was fighting more than broken wood. Finally, she stepped inside. "You can't just wait," she said softly. "We have 2 weeks." He didn't look up. "You think I don't know that?" His voice cracked against the noise of the hammer. "I've got no papers, no proof. The courts won't listen to a rancher with dirt under his nails." "Then let them listen to me," Clara said. He paused, finally meeting her eyes. I've written reports before, letters to boards, committees, schools. I know how they think. If we can prove the children are cared for, that they're learning, we might stand a chance." Elias set the hammer down, his shoulders slumping. "You'd risk that for us?" Clara smiled faintly. "It's not a risk. It's what's right." That afternoon, they rode into San Isidro, the nearest town, a place of dust, glass windows, and eyes that followed strangers. Clara carried a stack of notes and attendance lists she'd written herself. Elias carried the hope he tried not to show. At the courthouse, a clerk with spectacles barely looked up as they explained, "Guardianship filings require proof of birth, consent, and at least 2 witnesses," he droned. "Without that, your request will be denied." Elias clenched his jaw. "So these kids just go back to the streets?" "Sir, that's not my concern." Clara leaned forward, calm but fierce. "Then make it your concern. These children have names, faces. They read now. They write. They laugh. That's more than any orphanage can give them." The clerk looked up for the first time, startled, then uncertain. Something in her voice had cracked his practiced indifference. After a long pause, he sighed. "You didn't hear from me, but There's a traveling magistrate passing through next week. If you can reach him before he leaves, he can authorize temporary custody until the paperwork clears. Clara exhaled, relief flooding her chest. Thank you. Outside, the wind picked up again, swirling dust across the street. Elias looked at her with something between admiration and disbelief. You talked him into it. She smirked. Words can change the world, remember. He laughed, the first real laugh since that morning at the gate. But as they rode back to the ranch, Clara's smile faded. She knew what she'd done meant drawing attention to herself, a woman living alone, with a man and a house full of children. In a town like San Isidro, that kind of rumor could ruin her name forever. Still, she looked at Elias, and the thought settled clear as the desert stars. Some things are worth the cost. The wind returned to Ember Valley, dry and restless, as if it knew something was coming. Days passed since their visit to San Isidro, and every morning felt heavier than the last. Elias spent long hours repairing fences that didn't need mending, while Clara turned the barn into a true classroom. Chalkboard cleaned, slates laid neatly, books stacked like promises. But no matter how hard they worked, an invisible clock seemed to tick above their heads. One afternoon, she found Elias standing near the corral, staring toward the road that led west. He should be here by now, he muttered. The magistrate, she asked. He nodded. If he doesn't come soon, those men from Santa Fe will. The thought hung in the air like thunder. That evening, Clara gathered the children in the barn. The wind howled outside, rattling the doors, but inside, her voice was steady. We'll keep learning, she said gently, because no one can take that away from you. Not ever. A small boy, Thomas, raised his hand. Miss Duval, are they gonna take us away? She knelt beside him, her throat tightening. No, sweetheart. Not if we can help it. Elias watched from the shadows. There was a look in his eyes she hadn't seen before, pride, and something deeper, something like faith. Later that night, as the valley went quiet, Clara sat on the porch, papers scattered across her lap. She was rewriting her testimony, trying to find the words that could make strangers understand love that wasn't bound by blood. Elias joined her, silent for a while. The fire inside the house glowed faintly through the windows. You ever wonder why you came here? He asked finally. All the time, she admitted. But maybe I was meant to. Maybe everything before this was just leading me here. He looked out toward the hills, where lightning flashed far in the distance. You brought something to this place. Clara, before you came, it was just walls and noise. Now it feels like home. Her breath caught. Home? She repeated softly, as if testing the word for truth. He turned to her then, his voice low. When that magistrate comes, I'll need someone to stand beside me. Not just for the children, for me. Clara met his gaze, the storm reflected in both their eyes. You won't stand alone, Elias. And somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled, a warning and a promise all at once. The magistrate arrived 3 days later. Just as the storm broke over Ember Valley, rain swept across the desert, turning the dust to red clay and the air to thunder. A single wagon appeared on the horizon, carrying Judge Hollis, an aging man with sharp eyes and a face carved by years of decisions. Behind him rode one of the Santa Fe officials, the same man who had delivered the warning weeks ago. Clara stood on the porch with the children gathered close, their small hands clutching her skirt. Elias stepped forward, hat in hand, rain soaking his shirt. Mr. Rowe, Judge Hollis greeted, voice steady despite the storm. You've asked for a hearing. Let's have it here then, before the law, before the Lord, and before these witnesses. The official dismounted and crossed his arms. Your Honor, this man has no documents, no family ties. These children were found in his care without permission. Elias's jaw tightened. Permission? Nobody needed permission to leave them hungry and lost. The judge raised a hand for silence. Mr. Rowe, the law exists to protect the young, but it also recognizes guardianship born of duty and care. Tell me, what gives you the right to claim them? Elias's voice was low, roughened by truth. Nothing gives me that right, sir. I just couldn't walk away. When I found them, I saw fear in their eyes. The same kind I once had when I came back from the war and had nothing. I didn't take them in to own them. I took them in so they'd never feel that kind of emptiness again. The children stood silent, their faces pale but proud. Clara stepped forward then, heart pounding. If you take them, she said, you'll destroy the only home they've ever known. They learn here. They laugh here. The law might measure families by paper, but I measure them by love. And I've seen more of that on this ranch than anywhere else I've been. The rain fell harder, drumming against the roof. Judge Hollis looked at her, his eyes softening. And you, Miss Duval, you're not family to them, are you? No, she said quietly. But I'd fight for them as if I were. A silence stretched, broken only by thunder. Then, from behind her, little Lottie's voice piped up, trembling but clear. Please, sir, we don't want to go. Mr. Rowe takes care of us. Miss Duval teaches us. We're not orphans no more. The judge closed his eyes for a long moment. When he spoke, his tone was gentler. The law can be blind, child, but not deaf. He turned to the official. I'll sign temporary guardianship to Mr. Rowe and Miss Duval jointly if they continue providing proper education and care. The custody will become permanent within 6 months. The official protested, but the judge's voice cut through the rain. Decision made. As the wagon rolled away, the storm began to ease. Elias stood motionless, raindrops streaming down his face, though some looked suspiciously like tears. Clara smiled, her voice barely above the whisper of the wind. Looks like the storm passed. When the last trace of the storm faded from the sky, Ember Valley seemed almost reborn. The air smelled of wet sage and pine, and the fields shimmered with dew like 1,000 tiny stars scattered across the earth for the first time in weeks. Laughter carried across the yard again, real laughter, free and bright. The children chased one another through puddles, their boots splashing mud onto freshly washed fences. Elias watched from the porch, arms crossed, his expression half amusement, half disbelief. They're gonna ruin all that work you did, Clara teased, stepping beside him. He grinned. Work's meant to be ruined by joy, ain't it? She smiled, looking out at the scene. For a long moment, they stood there without speaking, just the sound of children's laughter and the soft dripping of rainwater from the roof. Inside, Clara began preparing lessons again. The barn smelled faintly of chalk and hay, but now there was something different about it, a peace she hadn't felt before. She caught herself humming as she arranged the books. When Elias entered, holding a cup of coffee, he leaned against the doorframe and watched her for a moment before saying, "Never thought I'd see a schoolhouse on this land, and I never thought I'd see a cowboy who runs one," she replied. Not looking up, he laughed quietly, setting the cup down. "Guess we both ended up in the wrong stories. Or maybe the right one," she said softly. In the evening, they gathered everyone for supper. The table was mismatched, tin plates, chipped mugs, but filled with warmth. The children told stories, exaggerated and wild, and even the quiet ones smiled. After dinner, as the younger ones drifted to sleep, Clara sat by the window, watching the last light fade over the valley. Elias joined her, the crackle of the fire between them. "You ever think about what comes next?" she asked. He tilted his head. "Next? The papers will make it official soon. The school, the children. You and I will be tied together in ways the world might not understand." Elias looked into the fire. "The world don't have to understand, long as the ones here do." She nodded, her heart soft but uncertain. Something unspoken hung between them, a tenderness that had grown quietly, rooted deep like the mesquite trees outside. Then, in a low voice, he said, "Clara, thank you for staying, for fighting when I didn't know how." She turned to him, her eyes glistening in the firelight. "You gave me something to fight for." Outside, The crickets began their song, and the valley breathed easy once more, alive, love, and finally at peace. Summer crept into Ember Valley like a gentle secret. Days grew longer, and the wind turned warm, carrying the scent of wildflowers and mesquite. The children spent hours reading beneath the oak near the corral, their laughter echoing through the open land. Clara had grown used to the rhythm of the ranch, the clatter of hooves at dawn, the hiss of coffee on the stove, the sound of pencils scratching across paper. It was a kind of music, and she found herself listening for it every morning. One evening, after the children had gone to bed, Elias was sitting by the barn, mending an old saddle under the lantern light. Clara approached quietly, the hem of her dress brushing against the dry grass. "You work more now that there's less to worry about," she said, half smiling. He looked up, that familiar half grin flickering across his face. "Maybe I just don't know how to sit still." Clara sat beside him, the lantern casting warm gold over their faces. For a while, they didn't speak. The night hummed softly around them, cicadas, distant coyotes, the crackle of cooling earth. Finally Elias said, "You ever miss it? The town life, the schoolhouses with real desks, and books that ain't been chewed by mice." She laughed quietly. "Sometimes. But out here, I feel like I'm teaching something that matters." He looked at her, really looked, and nodded. "You are." A pause settled between them, not awkward, but full. He set the saddle aside, leaning back on the fence rail. "You know, I never thought this place could feel alive again. I was just keeping it from falling apart." Clara turned her gaze toward the dark hills. Maybe it was waiting for someone to remind it what living looks like. He smiled, low and genuine. "Funny, I was thinking the same about myself." The lantern flickered, and for a heartbeat, everything felt suspended. The sound of the wind, the glow of the light, the space between their breaths. Clara spoke softly. "You built something beautiful here, Elias. Not just fences and roofs. You built a home." He looked at her with that steady, weathered gaze that had once faced storms and gunfire, but now held something far braver, tenderness. "Didn't do it alone," he said quietly. For a long time, neither moved. The stars stretched endless above them, and in that silence, something unspoken finally found its name. Clara rose first, brushing dust from her skirt. "Good night, Elias." He tipped his hat, though he wasn't wearing one. "Good night, Clara." As she walked back toward the house, she caught herself smiling, not the guarded kind she used to wear, but one that came from somewhere deep and certain. Inside, the children slept soundly, the air warm with safety and love. Outside, Elias sat beneath the stars, the repaired saddle beside him, a symbol of something mended, both leather and heart. And over the quiet land, the valley breathed alive, whole, and finally unafraid. Autumn came quietly to Ember Valley. The air turned crisp, and the hills began to glow with shades of amber and rust. The children ran through fallen leaves, their laughter echoing against the wide sky. It was a season of endings and of beginnings. Clara stood on the porch, holding a letter with the seal of the Santa Fe court. Her hands trembled slightly as she read it. The decision was final. The guardianship was permanent. The children, their children, would stay. Elias came up behind her, wiping dust from his gloves. "That the letter?" he asked. She nodded, unable to keep the smile from her lips. "It's done." For a moment, neither spoke. The wind carried the scent of wood smoke and pine between them. Then Elias let out a long breath, as though he'd been holding it for months. "Guess we're a family now," he said softly. Carl laughed, a sound of relief, not disbelief. "Guess so." The ranch felt different that day. The air was lighter, the chores easier, the sky brighter somehow. Even the old windmill creaked with a kind of joy. Later, Clara taught her lesson beneath the open sky. The children wrote their names in careful loops across scraps of parchment. When they finished, she asked them to read aloud. Each voice, small and uncertain at first, grew stronger. When Thomas read his, he looked up proudly. "Miss Duval." Does this mean we're like other families now? Clara hesitated, then knelt beside him. No, Thomas, she said softly. We're not like other families. We're ours. And that's something better. Elias stood nearby, leaning on the fence, his gaze warm and distant. For a man who had once known nothing but solitude, he now saw his life stretching wide with meaning, laughter, noise, little shoes by the door, lessons written on old barn walls. That evening, as the sun set, Clara and Elias sat on the porch, while the children chased the last light across the fields. The sky blazed in orange and gold, and for a long time, neither said a word. Finally, Clara whispered, "Do you ever wonder what people will say when they hear our story?" Elias tilted his head, smiling faintly. "Don't much care what they say. Let him talk. We'll keep living it." She looked at him, then really looked, and something in her heart settled. The wandering teacher and the lonely rancher had found something bigger than both of them. A place where love didn't ask permission. The wind rose again, cool and gentle, carrying laughter through the valley. And for the first time, the sound didn't echo, it belonged. Years passed quietly in Ember Valley. The house that once echoed with lessons and laughter grew into something deeper. A living memory made of wood, dust, and love. Seasons came and went. Winters of firelight and cocoa. Summers of long rides and dusty sunsets. The children grew. Thomas, the shy boy who once feared his own voice, now rode into town each week to help the local postmaster. Lottie began teaching the younger ones their letters, her handwriting neater than Clara's ever was. And little Ben, once the smallest, now towered over the fence rails, fixing gates the way Elias had taught him. The ranch changed, but it never lost its soul. Every nail, every board, every breath of the land carried a trace of those who had built it together. One quiet morning, Clara sat at the same table where she'd once written desperate letters to judges and officials. Now she was writing something else, a story, their story. She paused, dipping her pen again in ink, looking out the window where Elias was saddling a horse. His hair had silvered at the edges, but his back was still straight, his movement sure. When he caught her watching, he tipped his hat with that same crooked grin that had once made her heart race. It still did. Later, they rode together to the ridge overlooking the valley. The sun hung low, washing everything in gold. From up there, the land stretched wide and endless fences, trees, a home that had become more than wood and nails. Elias broke the silence first. Hard to believe, huh? Used to be just me and the wind out here. Clara smiled softly. Now it's us, and every soul we helped grow. He nodded. Guess that's the trick of it. You build a life, and one day it starts building you back. They sat there for a long while, saying little. Words weren't needed. The valley spoke for them, in rustling leaves, in children's laughter carried faintly on the wind, in the gentle hum of a place that had finally found peace. When they rode back to the ranch, twilight had already begun to settle. Clara looked at the light spilling from the windows, warm, steady, eternal. Inside, a new group of children waited, wanderers, orphans, strays taken by kindness. Lottie was teaching them now, chalk dust floating in the air just as it had years ago. Clara stood in the doorway, tears in her eyes and a smile on her lips. Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. You did it, he said quietly. She turned to him. We did. And as night wrapped Ember Valley in its familiar hush, the stars came out, one by one, like names written in the sky. Some stories end with goodbyes. Theirs ended with a home,